Chapter 1, The Other Yuna. I step off the car and the orchard air hits me, citrus and salt, clean enough to believe in, Jeju in early November. The sky is that particular shade that exists only here, too pale to be blue and too bright to be gray. And the morning holds the specific quality of cold that comes off the sea after traveling through a field of fruit trees. I breathe it in and feel, for the first time in several months, the tight set of my shoulders begin to loosen by some small degree. The tangerine trees stretch out in rows so perfect they look like someone arranged them to be photographed. Each one the same height, each one carrying the same warm weight of late-season fruit. The grove goes up the hillside and disappears into a low mist. And somewhere beyond the mist the mountain begins. And somewhere beyond the mountain the sea is on the other side. I adjust the strap of my bag, the structured beige one I have carried to every first day on every assignment since I started consulting 8 years ago. And I tell myself what I always tell myself at the beginning of something new: you know what you're doing. You've done this before. The Kim Jeju Orchard Resort, a premium rural tourism operation that was thriving for years ago and is now hemorrhaging revenue from a wound nobody wants to locate. 1 fraud complaint filed, 2 board disputes unresolved, 1 supplier contract that doesn't exist in any formal registry but keeps appearing on the expense ledger. My firm sent me because they trust my specific combination of precision and composure, and because I have a record of walking into difficult situations and walking out with something fixed. I take that seriously. I take everything I do seriously. Some people have told me I take things too seriously, and I have smiled at them and said nothing, because the kind of people who say that have never needed to prove they belong in a room. I pull my bag tighter and walk toward the main operations, building along the path that cuts between the first to orchard rows. The fruit is very close. I could reach out and take one without breaking stride. I don't, but I notice the urge, which is the sort of small sensory impulse Jeju seems to produce in me without permission. I've been to 12 properties in for years: a ski resort in Gangwon, a vineyard operation in Gyeongnam, a heritage hotel in Jeju that needed its entire revenue structure rebuilt from scratch. I walked into every one of them with this bag and this blazer and this posture, and I was never once this aware of the air. Jeju has a quality I haven't encountered in a property before. It doesn't perform its own beauty. It just waits. The trees are arranged by someone who understood repetition as a kind of argument. This is order, the rows say. This is something tended. This is a life organized around patience and the long return. I tell myself my awareness of the place is professional. Atmospheric familiarity matters in restructuring work. Context shapes the solution. I tell myself things that are technically defensible, and mostly I believe them. I'm halfway through the row when I see her. She's standing near the tangerine trees, back half turned to me, sunlight falling exactly on black hair, the same length as mine, the same way it falls when you walk with purpose and let it settle behind your shoulders, the same center part I have maintained since I was 23 years old because it communicates precision without severity, at least according to every piece of professional style advice I consumed in my 20s. She's wearing my blazer, not one like it, mine, the exact beige, the exact structured cut, the slight collar detail I had to order twice because the first manufacturer sent ivory and I do not wear ivory. I know this blazer the way I know my own handwriting. I know the way it sits on a shoulder. I know the small pull at the left seam when you shift your bag from one arm to the other. She shifts her bag. The seam pulls. I stop walking. A worker comes from between the trees and bows respectfully, and he says my name. Director Park, he says it clearly to her, and she turns, and she smiles, and she answers him with the complete ease of someone who has never in her life had a moment of uncertainty about her right to stand anywhere she is standing. Of course, she says. I'm Yuna Park, my name, my exact cadence. the specific quality of voice I developed across years of practice. The one that says I am measured and I am competent and I am not asking you to believe me. I am simply informing you. I don't move. The worker nods. He asks something about the afternoon delivery schedule. She answers with specific knowledge of the operation, things she should only know if she has been here for days, things I learned only this morning from briefing documents I read on the ferry. He bows again. He walks away. She puts one hand on a tangerine tree branch with the particular proprietary ease of someone touching something they own. The sun is still low enough to come in sideways through the orchard rows, and it lights her from the left, and I am standing 40 feet away looking at something that has no category in any experience I have had. She turns her head, she looks at me across the tangerine rows, and I look at her. And for one full suspended second, the only sound is the wind coming off the upper hillside and the faint creak of the orchard under its own weight. She doesn't look surprised. That's what breaks me open. Not the blazer, not my name in her mouth. The fact that she looks like she has been expecting me. Like my arrival was a scheduled item in her morning. She looks like she's been waiting for exactly this. She crosses the distance between us slowly, unhurried, with my walk, and she stops close enough that I can confirm what I already know. She has my height down to the centimeter, she has my posture, she has the exact angle at which I hold my chin when I need people to see authority rather than uncertainty. You took your time, she says, low, only for me. Her voice is mine translated into a slightly different register, the way a perfect copy of a piece of music still has its own resonance. I've already started without you. I open my mouth, I close it, I take a breath. For the first time in 8 years, I do not know the next move. Chapter 2, The Rules of the Orchard. I don't sleep. The guest house room they assigned me had been reserved under my name, which means she booked it. Or someone booked it using my name, with my name, weeks before I was formally assigned to this project. That detail alone should keep me awake, and it does. But it's not the only thing. I lie on the narrow bed and stare at the low ceiling, and I do what I always do when I can't resolve a problem immediately. I categorize. I make an internal list of every fact I know for certain, everything I can verify, every variable I cannot yet place, facts. My name is Yuna Park. I was assigned to this project by my firm 9 days ago. I have a signed contract, a stamped identification, and a digital trail of communication that goes back 6 weeks. I did not arrive until this morning. Variables. She arrived first. She knows the operation. She has documentation that, from the administrative manager's expression, is convincing enough to create genuine confusion. Someone placed her here. Someone who knew I was coming and had enough lead time to prepare an interference. By 4 in the morning, I have run through every version of this that ends badly. There are 7. By 5:30, I have identified the 3 that are actionable. By 6, I get up, put my hair back exactly as I always put it, and go to the orchard before anyone else is there. I walk the rows in the early light. The trees are quiet. The fruit hangs still in the cold air, and the path between the rows is soft with fallen leaves. And for a few minutes, the whole place feels like something that belongs only to itself and not to the situation. I am standing in the middle of the specific quality of early morning in an orchard is different from early morning anywhere else I've been. There's an industry to it, even in the silence. The trees are doing something. Growing, finishing, holding. The cold makes the citrus smell sharper, and the sharpness is almost medicinal. Like clarity you didn't request, I stand in it. For a moment longer than the few minutes I allowed myself, then I think about the conversation with the administrative manager I'm about to have, and I square my shoulders. And I go, the manager is a man named Park Jung-soo. And he looks at me the way people look at a situation they very much do not want to be responsible for. He's a careful man. Neat desk, careful hands. He has probably been careful his entire career, which means he is not equipped for what is currently happening in his operation and he knows it. I place my documentation on his desk with deliberate patience. Signed contract, firm letterhead, Korean national identification, stamped certifications from 2 professional bodies. He reviews each piece without speaking. The other director Park, he says finally, with the specific delicacy of someone disarming something, also has documentation that appears to be in order. I close my eyes for 1 second. Just one. I understand, I say. I'd like access to the operational accounts, beginning with supplier payment records for the past 24 months. Of course, he says, in the tone of someone who has not decided anything. I walk out of his office, into the main corridor and directly into a man coming the other way with 2 cups of coffee. 1 cup transfers to my hand with the efficiency of someone who has good reflexes. He keeps the other. He looks at the mild collision, looks at me, and doesn't apologize because the truth is it was slightly more my fault than his and he seems like a person who is precise about that kind of accounting. You are the new one, he says, not unkindly. Observationally, I'm the only one, I say. He has a smile that knows the distance between those 2 statements without needing it explained. Debatable from where I've been standing this morning. He holds out the cup. Minho, I run land operations. 4 years. You're not the first complicated thing to arrive at this orchard. Is that a warning? It's an introduction. He looks at me evenly. I'm not in whatever this is, but I know this orchard better than anyone living, and if you're actually here to fix something real, then knowledge is useful to you. I take the coffee. I look at him properly for the first time. The kind of bronzing you get from working outdoors in every season. Work-roughened hands that belong to someone who doesn't delegate the physical parts. Eyes that are paying close attention without performing attention. He's not trying to impress me. It's a noticeable quality in the context of the morning I've had. Show me the land records, I say. He does. We spend 3 hours walking the entire property from the lower orchard rows to the upper terracing near the hillside boundary. He explains the operation with the specific fluency of someone who genuinely loves a thing without romanticizing it. He tells me which trees are struggling and why. He tells me about the water table changes over the past 2 winters. He tells me which of the processing equipment is original and which was replaced, and by whom, and at what cost. I take notes. I listen to the notes under the notes, and then I see a dot in the supply invoices, buried under 4 layers of subcontractor entries and cross-referencing codes, a vendor I cannot locate in any official registry. No registration number, no physical address, no verifiable contact. Invoice quarterly, consistently, for the same service described in language broad enough to mean anything. Drawing approximately 18% of operational revenue. For at least 26 months, I look at Minho. Did you know about this? I ask. I suspected something like it. He says it without defensiveness. I flagged it twice through formal channels. Nothing happened. A pause. I filed a written note the second time. It was acknowledged and then nothing happened again. Who acknowledged it? The outgoing operations director, who resigned 4 months ago. Someone didn't want it found, or someone wanted it to stay findable long enough to be useful as a weapon. I step away from the records table and call June from the edge of the east orchard, where the trees open onto the sea-facing hillside and the wind comes through with enough force to make the call feel like a private thing. He answers on the second ring. There's a woman here using my full name and my firm credentials, I say. She arrived 3 days before I did. She is currently operating as the project director and the administrative staff cannot determine who is authorized. A pause. Not surprise. The specific kind of pause that is calculation dressed as consideration. I'm aware of the situation, he says. I need you to maintain composure and not create a public dispute before I can resolve the authorization question formally. I'll have this addressed within 48 hours. That is not an explanation. It's the one I'm able to give you right now. June, 48 hours. Yuna, I end the call. The hillside falls away sharply below me and the sea is very far down. A flat gray-green that doesn't move the way sea should from this distance. The wind is cold and direct. I stand here for 2 minutes. I allow myself 2 minutes of stillness in which I don't perform composure for anyone because there is no one here to perform for. Then I go back down to the guest house. The room is exactly as I left it. Bag unpacked and organized along the far wall, documents laid out on the table by category, phone charger and the only outlet near the desk, except for the envelope. It's on the table beside my notebook. Small white, my name written on the front in careful handwriting that is not mine and not anyone I know. The seal has been pressed down and then lifted, or I'm reading something that isn't there. I open it, a photograph, taken on a city street. Me in Seoul, standing outside my apartment building in the coat I wear to the corner pharmacy, not to anything that matters. 3 weeks ago, from the look of the light and the specific coat, I was not aware of a camera. I was not aware of anything except that I needed to buy headache tablets and get home before my 7 o'clock call. Beneath the photograph, one line in the same careful handwriting, I know who you are. The question is, do you? Chapter 3, The Man in Linen. I bring the photograph to Minho, not because trust is established between us, because he is the only person on this property who has given me information without an agenda attached, and in the current context that makes him the closest thing I have to an ally. I accept this with the pragmatism that the situation requires and the discomfort that the pragmatism doesn't entirely cover. He reads the note without expression. He turns the photograph over in his hands, looking at the background. Whoever took this knew your home address and had eyes on you for at least a few days before your assignment was public, he says. That's not someone who reacted to your arrival. That's someone who planned for it. Yes, the woman using your name, Ha-yoon. The staff are calling her. She's been here 6 days. She came prepared. But this kind of preparation is different. This is personal surveillance. I know. He hands it back to me. Our fingers don't quite touch in the transfer. The almost contact is somehow more present than contact would have been. I put the photograph in my bag. Show me the access logs. I say, we go back to the records. I work through the morning with the focused silence I learned to produce in environments where silence was the only private thing available. Minho works alongside me. He answers questions when I have them and is quiet when I don't, which is exactly the right calibration and which I notice myself being grateful for in a way that is slightly inconvenient. At some point, without preamble, he says, Seoul offered me a senior management position 3 times over the past 4 years. I look up from the screen. The third offer was from a firm that manages 3 other resort properties in Gyeonggi Province. Good salary. Significant scope. He's looking at the tree line through the window, not at me. I declined all 3. Why? He turns his head and looks at me directly. Because I had something real here that I wasn't finished with. And I learned enough to know that moving toward a title isn't the same as moving towards something that matters. He says it without self-satisfaction. It's not a lesson. It's just a thing that happened to be true. I look back at my screen and let the sentence do whatever it's going to do in the back of my head. By early afternoon, I find the log I've been dreading. System. Access records from my firm's project portal. Activity under my credentials. Not routine document pulls. Formal approvals. Purchase authorizations in the 5-figure range. A vendor agreement renewal carrying my digital signature. All of it dated 3 to 5 weeks ago. All of it from an IP address that places the access point in a building 2 kilometers from here. Before I arrived on Jeju, before I was even formally assigned. This is not sabotage of an operation. This is someone building a case against me specifically, using my identity to create liability that will attach to my name the moment anyone looks closely at the accounts. Minho, he's close enough that he only has to lean slightly to see the screen. I feel the warmth of him before I register the proximity. He reads the log carefully, those approval timestamps, he says, don't match any physical presence on this property. The deliveries they authorized were received. I signed for 2 of them myself. But the person who authorized them remotely, that's not you. No, you need those timestamps to place you physically elsewhere. Do you have anything that puts you in Seoul on those dates? I can reconstruct it. Phone records, transit card, building access logs from my firm. Do that today, he pauses. And move faster than whoever built this, because they're not finished. The window is open and the orchard air comes through in pulses with the wind off the hillside. And I am aware of how close we are standing and aware that I haven't unclenched my right hand in approximately 4 hours. I unclench it, he sees. He doesn't comment. At the end of the day, after I've sent 4 secure messages and assembled what I can of a counter record, Minho appears at the door of the operations room. He's changed from his work shirt into a cleaner version of the same thing, linen, sleeves already rolled. He has his jacket over one arm. Come with me, he says. There's something I want to show you. It's not work. I should go back to the guest house and continue building my documentation. I know I should. I calculate the cost of not doing it for 1 hour and determine it's survivable. I go with him. He takes me up the trail that runs along the east property boundary toward the upper ridge. And we walk mostly without speaking, which doesn't feel uncomfortable the way silence usually does. The path narrows as it rises and we have to walk close together. And occasionally his arm brushes mine, and neither of us adjusts to the top. The view opens, the entire orchard below us, ordered and amber in the late light. The hillside falling away to the south, and beyond it the sea, dark green going to gray at the horizon. The wind up here is direct and cold and it takes my hair immediately. We stand side by side at the edge of the path. His shoulder is lightly against mine. Just the pressure of it. Just the warmth under his jacket sleeve. I don't say anything. He doesn't either. The sun drops below the ridgeline and the light changes to something more private. And I stand in it and feel something I haven't felt since I arrived on this island and possibly for some time before that. Like I'm allowed to just be where I am, not performing composure, not building the next argument, not monitoring how I'm being read, just standing on a hillside with the sea below and the cold air and a man whose shoulder is warm against mine. Watching the light do what light does when there's no one performing for it, I notice I'm breathing. Slowly, from the right place. I don't move closer to him. I don't need to. The proximity is exactly what it is. My phone rings. I look at it. June. The 48 hours he promised have elapsed. I put the phone back in my pocket. Minho glances at me. Not yet, I say. He nods. When we get back down the path and I push open the door of the guest house, someone is already on the porch. Ha-yoon is sitting in the single wooden chair with her ankles crossed and her hands folded in her lap, wearing the same posture I use when I'm waiting for something I'm not sure of but have decided to go through with anyway. She doesn't pretend to be anything other than waiting for me. We need to talk, she says. She holds my gaze with the specific steadiness of someone who has decided that looking away would cost more than looking. About who really brought us both here. Chapter 4, The Same Armor. She doesn't ask to come inside. She simply stands when I open the door and moves in with the particular efficiency of someone who has calculated that the threshold conversation is less defensible than the inside one. I pour 2 glasses of water. It gives my hands something to do and it signals that I'm listening, which I am, despite everything. We sit across the narrow table and look at each other for a moment in the way that women who have trained themselves to give nothing away do when they are finally in a room where giving something away might be the only available move. His name is Director Huang, she says. He sits on the resort's investment board. He reached out to me 6 weeks ago through a connection I trusted. She sets her hands flat on the table. He told me the consulting contract had been awarded irregularly. that there were questions about your firm's selection process, that the real work needed someone already inside the operation before the assigned consultant arrived. I wait, he offered me a contract. Enough money to matter. He said it was a correction, not a sabotage, and you believed that. She looks at her glass. I believed it enough. And I needed the work. She says the last part without decoration. You knew I was the consultant being replaced. I knew your name. Yes, and you came anyway. Yes. She doesn't look away. She doesn't flinch or soften it or reach for an explanation that makes it easier to hear. She just sits with it. I think about what it takes to do that, to say yes without qualifying it. I've interviewed enough people to know that the ones who don't deflect their own wrongdoing are almost always telling the truth about everything else they say. He didn't tell you about the login. I say. She looks up. Someone accessed my firm credentials remotely, made formal approvals and purchase authorizations under my digital signature before I ever landed on Jeju. Someone was building evidence against me while you were meant to be the visible problem. I didn't know about that, flat and certain and immediate. That's not what he hired me for. He hired me to occupy the space, create enough procedural confusion that the client would lose confidence in the assignment and the contract would be voided. You were the distraction, I say. She closes her eyes once, briefly, with the control of someone who has learned that visible pain is a liability. Yes, we sit with that for a moment. The window is open. The orchard outside is going dark, and the cold coming off the trees smells like citrus and soil. We trained at the same firm, I say finally, different years, same training, same performance standards, same pressure around the question of whether we actually belonged in the work. I look at her directly. I recognize that posture. I wear it every day. Something shifts in her expression. Small and contained and very real. You're not my enemy, Hyun, but I'm not pretending this didn't happen. I'm not asking you to. She sits up straighter, which shouldn't be possible given how straight she already was. I'm asking you to let me help correct it. I have documentation of the contact with Huang, the original brief he gave me. Wire transfer records. A pause. I was used. I also let myself be used. I'd like to do something about both of those things. Before I can answer, there's a sound from the main drive, an engine, a door. We both go to the window. The man who steps out of the car is tall in a way that is the first thing you notice, followed immediately by the quality of his coat and then the particular stillness of someone who has spent years learning not to betray what they're thinking in the moment of thinking it. Dark hair, clean shave, the kind of posture that isn't about arrogance but about a long history of being the person things are brought to. He reaches back into the car for a slim document case. He looks up at the building as he closes the door, and for 1 second, across the distance of the drive and the darkening garden, he looks directly at the window where I'm standing. June. In person, he's more than the voice I know from calls. There is a gravity to him that a telephone erases, something that takes up space in a room even before he enters it. Hyun looks at me. He knows something he hasn't told you. I know, I say. I find him 20 minutes later in the operations corridor, and the space between us in the narrow hallway is closer than any phone call has prepared me for. He's taller than I calibrated. The controlled energy of him is more present than I expected. You should have told me what you knew, I say. Yes, he says. Without negotiation. That's still not an explanation. I know. He holds my gaze steadily and the steadiness doesn't feel like deflection. I had information suggesting there was a board-level action being planned against this assignment. I made a calculation that if you arrived informed, you would move in ways that protected you but also warned whoever was behind it that we knew. So I sent you without the full picture and trusted your capability to navigate it. You used me as a probe. I trusted you to be exactly as capable as you have been. He says it without apology. But there's something underneath the certainty. Something slightly unguarded, like the sentence cost more than it looked like. I wasn't wrong about that. I hold his gaze. He reaches past me to point to something on the document spread across the operations table. And the motion brings us close, his face at my peripheral vision. The clean scent of his jacket at this proximity. And when I turn to look at what he's indicating, our faces are a few inches apart and neither of us has moved back. He doesn't move back. I don't either. My phone buzzes on the table. I look at it. A message from Hyun. Documentation sent to the secure folder. I straighten. I need your system access credentials, I say. The fraud trail Hyun found requires director-level verification to close the proof. Yes, he says. Tomorrow, tonight would be better. He almost smiles. It's the first almost smile I've seen from him, and it does something unexpected to the quality of the conversation. Tomorrow morning. I'll have everything ready. I find Minho at the edge of the lower orchard just before dark, hands in his pockets, looking at the trees with the quiet regard of someone checking on something they care about. He sees my face when I come down the path and he stands up straighter. You should rest, I say. So should you. I mean it. I need to think through something and I need to do it alone. He nods. He starts walking back toward the staff quarter and then he stops. Just once without turning around. Whatever it is, he says. It's still going to be true in the morning. I stand in the empty orchard after he's gone and I feel the weight of the day on my shoulders and the very particular fatigue of being two people at once. The composed professional and the person underneath her who is exhausted and confused and quietly, carefully afraid. Then I go inside. I walk down the staff corridor to the room with the warm light visible under the door. I raise my hand. I knock. Chapter 5 Taste of Tangerine. Minho opens the door and looks at me with the unhurried attention of someone who has been hoping for something. Without letting himself name it, "Come in," he says. I come in. I have a folder of land irrigation records under my arm, which is the story I had partially prepared for myself on the walk over. And he takes it from me without comment and sets it on the corner of the desk. And we both understand without stating it that we are done with the version of this evening where documents are the actual subject. The room is warm. A lamp on the desk. The window slightly open. The orchard dark and cold outside. The smell of the trees coming in on the air. You said something today, I begin. About the promotions you didn't take. I did. I've been thinking about it since. I thought you might be. He leans against the desk, arms loosely crossed, watching me with the patience that I've come to understand is not distance. It's the opposite of distance. What were you thinking? I move a little further into the room. I set my phone down on the table. That I have never once made a choice like that. Not because I couldn't have. Because I didn't know how to want something that didn't also prove something. I look at him. Everything I've chosen for the last 8 years has been the next proof. The next demonstration that I earned my place. And I don't know when that became the whole shape of my life, but it did. And now I'm very tired of proving things to people who aren't in this room. He uncrosses his arms and crosses the space between us in a way that is deliberate without being urgent. He doesn't rush because rushing would imply he isn't certain, and he is certain. And he wants me to know that before anything else. He raises both hands and holds my face very gently. His palms are warm and slightly rough and very still. You don't need to perform anything for me, he says. I decided you were real a long time before tonight. Something in me that has been braced for impact releases. I reach up and put my hands over his. And he waits, and then I close the distance. We don't hurry. There's no urgency except the slow kind. The kind that has been building through 3 days of proximity and careful non-saying and the specific tension of two people who are paying very close attention to each other. He kisses me with the unhurried thoroughness of someone who has been thinking about how to do something correctly and has decided that correctly means slowly. I stop organizing my thoughts. I stop cataloging. I stop noting what I'm feeling for later analysis. He moves with intention. Every point of contact is present in a way I'm not used to. Not performed presence but actual full attention. And I realize as he draws me toward him that what I'm feeling is the specific unfamiliarity of being met rather than assessed. He's not forming an opinion. He's just here. His hands move through my hair and I lean into it, and somewhere in that motion the last managed distance between us closes. We fall into each other with the quality of finally. Not rushed, not desperate. Thorough and warm and full of the specific weight of two people who have been carrying things alone and are, for these hours, allowed to put them down. The lamp is low and the orchard smell comes through the window in pulses. Citrus and soil and the faint cold of the mountain air. And his mouth is at my throat and my hands are in his hair and I stop calculating the cost of anything. That's what it is, finally. I stop calculating. The hours have the quality of suspended time. There's something almost illicit about being this present, about being somewhere so fully that you stop monitoring your own edges. He is attentive in a way that is both physical and something harder to name. Like he's listening to me even in the parts of this that aren't words. I let myself be listened to when I finally lie still in the dark. His breathing slow and warm beside me. I feel as though something I've been carrying in my chest for years, something so familiar I forgot it was weight, has simply left. I don't name what's left in its place, not yet. I get up before the light changes. I find my clothes in the dark by feel and dress with the slow, careful deliberateness of someone checking that she is still herself after something large. She is. She is herself. She just feels different inside the shape of that. I take the folder from the desk. Old habit. I ease the door open and step into the corridor. June is at the far end. He's standing with his phone in his hand and his coat on, as though he came out for air and stayed longer than he meant to. He looks up at the sound of the door and our eyes meet across the length of the hallway. He looks at me. He looks at the door I just came from. He looks back at me. He doesn't say anything. For one long second something moves through his expression that isn't anger. It's slower and quieter than anger, and it has the texture of something irreversible. Like reaching for a glass that's been moved. He looks back down at his phone. I walk the other way. That morning, Hyun finds me in the data room with the vendor trail documentation spread across 3 tables. I closed the linkage last night, she says. The ghost vendor traces back to a holding company registered in Huang's wife's name 18 months ago. I have the registry documents, the financial flow, and a timeline. She sets a printed ledger on the table. But the final access log that seals it requires director-level system credentials. Mine aren't recognized. Yours are flagged. June's, I say. Yes. I think about the way he looked at me in the corridor. The glass that was moved. The careful way his face closed back into composure. I'll get them, I say. Chapter 6 Dinner and the fracture. I find June in the conference room at 9 in the morning, working through something on his laptop with the controlled focus he brings to everything. He's had the same quality of attention since he arrived, the kind that sits in a room and makes the room aware of it without any apparent effort. I need your system credentials, I say. Ha-yoon has built the fraud documentation to the point where director-level verification is the only remaining step. He closes the laptop slowly. He looks at me with the particular expression of someone who has been thinking about several things at once and is now sorting which one to lead with. Dinner. Tonight, he says. I look at him. Not a condition, he says. And something in his voice shifts, some small seam giving way beneath the controlled surface. And ask, I want to have dinner with you, not because of the credentials. And then yes, you'll have everything you need. I look at him for a moment longer than necessary, taking the measure of what he just did. June doesn't make requests without calculation. Except this one sounded like it arrived before he had time to calculate it. 8 o'clock, I say. The restaurant is built into the cliff face on the south coast. Dark wood and long windows and the kind of candlelight that makes everything look like a decision rather than an accident. The sea is black and moving far below the glass, and it makes the room feel like it's floating. June stands when I walk in, unrehearsed. I notice that about it. We eat slowly and we talk in the specific way that to people talk when they have stopped managing each other's impressions. It takes time to get there, a first course of professional courtesy, a second course of something more honest, and then somewhere between the wine and the main dish the performance simply drops. He tells me about the company he grew up expected to inherit and the specific gravity of that expectation, and how somewhere in his 30s he stopped being able to tell the difference between what he wanted and what he had been taught to want. He tells me about the exhaustion of winning at things that don't resolve anything. I tell him about the fear I've never said out loud to anyone, the one that sits behind every professional success like a shadow cast in the wrong direction. The specific terror that one day I will fail visibly in front of people whose respect I spent years building, and that when that happens I will discover there is nothing beneath the competence, that the competence was the whole of me. You don't actually believe that, he says. Sometimes I do. Late at night, before something important. I believe it very completely for about 11 minutes. He looks at me across the candle with the kind of attention that doesn't borrow anything from the setting. That would be the same across a bad table in a bad light. I wanted to see what you would do when it got difficult, he says quietly. Not to test you, to see you. There's a difference. I don't think I've always known that. The candle is very low between us. The sea outside is very dark and very far down. That's the most honest thing you've said to me. I tell him, I know, he says. I'm trying to do more of it. We leave together. The walk back to the resort is unhurried and the night air is cold and clean, and the conversation has gone quiet in the way it does when words have done what they can. In his room, he is precise in the way that some people are precise, which is to say it is its own form of intensity. He is not cold. He is contained in the way that things under pressure are contained, heat through glass, and when that containment finally loosens it doesn't disappear. It converts. He asks before anything, quietly and directly, and the asking is its own intimacy. I answer with my hands. There is an architecture to him, to the way he moves and where he puts his attention. Like someone who has been thinking about how to give something correctly for longer than he admitted to himself. His hands are careful. His focus is absolute. He is not performing closeness, he is simply close, and the distinction matters more than I expected. He is nothing like Minho, where Minho was earth and warmth and the deep relief of being received without terms. June is something more combustible. Two people who have each learned to contain themselves entirely, discovering what happens when neither of them is maintaining that containment. Something in me that is usually behind glass breaks surface afterward, lying in the dark listening to his breathing steady and slow. I let the room be what it is for a few minutes. Then I open the laptop. I need the system access. I have it now. I work through the fraud verification with the clinical precision of someone finishing a job, and the evidence closes exactly as it should, clean and complete and damning. I'm about to close the browser. I see the mail thread. It shouldn't be visible in his open tabs. It is. His name in the sender field, the board chairman's name in the recipient. 3 weeks old. I read it once. I read it again. He had written, "She is the right consultant for this. She will hold up under what's coming. I am confident in her specifically." And then, 4 exchanges later in the same thread, I am aware of Huang's planned interference. Proceed with her assignment as scheduled. I set the laptop down on the side table. I set it down very carefully, with the same precision I use for everything, because that precision is currently the only thing operating normally in my body. He knew, not all of it, but the shape of it. He knew there was a hostile action planned, and he sent me anyway, and he called that trust, and the word choice is technically defensible and emotionally catastrophic. He protected me and used me in the same breath, and the protection was real. That's the part I can resolve. I get dressed in the dark. I close the door without sound. The orchard at night is very still. The trees are solid dark shapes against a sky that has given up color entirely. And the air is cold enough that each breath requires intention. Minho is there. He's standing at the edge of the first tangerine row with his hands in his jacket pockets, not moving, not checking his phone, simply standing in the dark the way someone stands when they came out to think and the thinking slowed into just being somewhere. He hears me on the path. He turns, I walk toward him. I stop a foot away. I found something tonight, I say, and my voice is steady, which costs me more than it looks like. Something that reframes the last week. Being chosen isn't the same as being protected. I keep learning that in new configurations, he looks at me with the steady, unhurried attention that is his specific gift, the kind that doesn't try to fix anything before it understands it. He opens his hand, palm up, between us, an offer with no attached terms, no deadline, no request for anything in return. I look at his hand, I look at his face. Tomorrow, I say, I'm going to need tonight to myself. He closes his hand unhurried. He nods, he goes back inside. I stay in the orchard for a long time, in the dark and cold, with the trees and the smell of citrus and the sound of the distant sea, and I let myself feel the full weight of everything I've discovered tonight. The fraud trail I closed, the warmth of the room I just left, the email and what it means and what it doesn't. I have a habit, when something difficult arrives, of immediately routing it toward resolution. What is the actionable next step? What information do I need? What is the timeline? It's the same mechanism that makes me good at my work and that has kept a great deal of my actual life at a careful distance. I don't do that right now. I just stand in the dark and let the email be what it is. A man who believed in me enough to send me into something dangerous. A man who called that belief and didn't stop to question whether belief requires consent to be offered as protection. Two things that are both true. The difficulty of holding both without resolving them into a simpler shape. I've been taught that ambivalence is weakness, that you decide, and then you act. But I think ambivalence sometimes just means you're paying close enough attention to see the whole thing. I let it all be true at the same time, because it is. Chapter 7 Fall and Ruth contract suspension notice arrives at 7:15 in the morning. Delivered by the client representative in person with the expression of a man delivering information he wishes were different. Director Huang had moved the night before. He'd prepared a package of materials that included the fraudulent login records, a curated selection of the email thread with his own name carefully removed, and a written narrative that placed me as an architect of the financial irregularities rather than their target. It was clean work, systematic, the kind of thing you build when you've had weeks to prepare it. The client representative is polite. He is apologetic in the specific way that people are. Apologetic when they have already made the decision and are managing the delivery of it rather than reconsidering it. It's a temporary hold pending review, he says. We simply need time to establish the correct authorization chain. Of course, I say. He leaves. I stand in the corridor outside the meeting room and feel the floor shift. Not metaphorically. There's a physical sensation to it, the specific proprioceptive drop of something you were counting on no longer being where it was. The weeks of work, the careful documentation, the relationships built across a property I've come to know better than I expected to. I wait for the panic. It doesn't come. What comes instead, after a few seconds of absolute stillness, is anger. Not the ragged kind, the clean kind, cold and clarifying and directed precisely at the thing that caused it. I have not worked this hard, for this long, under these conditions, to lose to something Huang built from a desk with other people's credentials. That is not how this ends. June appears at my side. He looks at me with the expression of someone who is already calculating solutions. I can make calls this morning. There are 2 people on the regional oversight board who know. He stops. I resolve this, I say. My name, my project, my resolution. He looks at me for a long moment. Something in his expression does the thing it did in the corridor 2 days ago, the reaching for something, the finding it isn't there, the accepting of that. And then something else comes through. Not reluctance. Something closer to recognition. He steps back. I go to find Ha-yoon. She's already in the data room when I get there, as though she knew before I did. The documentation she's been building spread across the table in ordered sections. Everything I have, she says, before I speak. She opens the first folder. The holding company registration. The financial flows from the ghost vendor. The original brief Huang gave me, with his name on it. The wire transfer records. She opens a second. And my written account of the engagement dated and signed, which I am prepared to deliver verbally to the client and anyone else who requires it. You understand what that means for you, I say. Your involvement is in those documents. I know what I did, she says evenly. I'm not protecting my role in it. I'm correcting it. I look at her for a moment. Thank you, I say. She nods once. Minho arrives 20 minutes later carrying a full physical record binder he's been assembling. He tells me, since month 3 on the job, handwritten ledgers, photographs of delivery receipts, vendor contact cards, a timeline cross-referencing the anomalous approvals against physical deliveries he personally signed for, which creates an irreconcilable gap between the approval records and any presence of mine on the island. I've had this for 2 years, he says. I didn't have anywhere to bring it that I trusted. You do now, I say. He places it on the table beside Ha-yoon's documentation, and the combination of the two is significant. Not just significant. It's complete. The presentation to the client and the resort board representatives takes place in the main meeting hall at 2 in the afternoon. 8 people around a long table. The client representative and his senior colleague, 3 board members, 2 of whom looked skeptical when they sat down. I'm wearing the blazer I've worn every day. There's a faint streak of soil on the left cuff from walking the East Terrace path in the rain 2 mornings ago. I noticed it this morning and I thought about changing and I decided not to. I stand at the front of the room. I open my mouth. My voice shakes. Once, on the 3rd sentence, the one where I say my name clearly for the record. The voice I have trained into steadiness over 8 years of making it reliable in difficult rooms shakes once, and then it doesn't. I speak for 38 minutes. I present the vendor registration history and the financial flow and the holding company connection to Huang's family. I present the login timestamp records against my physical location records from Seoul. I present Ha-yoon's documentation of the engagement Huang initiated, which she delivers herself in 4 measured minutes that are more damning for their precision than for their length. I present Minho's 2-year physical record of the delivery anomalies, which closes the evidence with the specific finality of something that was always true and is now simply in the room. I don't perform any of it. I just say what is true clearly. In my own voice, the skeptical board members are not skeptical when I finish. We'll need the standard 48 hours to formalize a response, the client representative says. Of course, I say. My second of course of the day. This one feels different. I walk out of the meeting hall and into the cold afternoon. The orchard is a few hundred meters away and I walk toward it without deciding to. I stand in the first row of tangerine trees and I breathe. My voice shook in that room. In front of 8 people whose opinion matters to my professional future. My voice shook and the ceiling didn't fall and I didn't disappear and the evidence remained exactly as strong after the shake as before it. I failed slightly. In public, and I'm still standing, and the standing feels like it costs less than I thought it would. That's the thing I've been afraid of for 8 years. That's the whole shape of it. And it turns out the shape is smaller than the fear. June finds me on the operations porch as the light goes. He sits down in the chair beside mine without asking. And we look at the orchard for a while. You didn't need me, he says. No, I knew you wouldn't. That's partly why I didn't tell you what I knew. He pauses. It's not a good reason, no? It isn't. He looks at his hands. When you go back, if you want to try without the strategy and without the managed silences and without me treating confidence as a substitute for honesty, I want to try that. I look at him. I hear you, I say. That's real, but, no but. I just need a little time to know what I want. He accepts that with the specific grace of someone who has learned the hard way that pushing is not the same as pursuing. Later, alone in the dark orchard, I pull a tangerine from the nearest tree. The skin breaks under my thumbnail. The scent is immediate and overwhelming. The whole island in one clean burst. I eat it slowly and I let myself feel everything. I've been filing away and categorizing and holding at careful distance for the past 10 days, and then something in me goes quiet. I know what I want. I say it to the dark orchard, to the trees, to the cold air coming off the mountain. I've said that phrase my entire career. I want the partnership track. I want the next assignment. I want the referral from the client who said I was the best they'd worked with. Each want was real and I honored each one. But I said all of them inside the logic of proof, inside the frame of what I was trying to demonstrate. This want is different. It exists outside the frame entirely. It doesn't prove anything. It doesn't advance anything. It's just true, the way the cold is true, the way the citrus smell is true, the way the sound of the sea going on in the dark beyond the mountain is true. You can't optimize truth. You can only decide what to do with it. Tomorrow, I'll go get it. Chapter 8. Name that is Minho. Vote is unanimous. The client representative delivers the news in the main lobby at 10 in the morning with the handshake of someone who is relieved to be on the right side of something. The contract is reinstated in full. Director Huang's access to board communications is suspended pending the formal audit that Ha-Yun's documentation made unavoidable. 2 other board members, who had filed suppression complaints about the earlier fraud flags, are being reviewed. I accept the handshake and the news with the composure that I've always brought to professional outcomes and the new, quieter awareness that composure is a tool, not a self. We appreciate your professionalism throughout, the representative says. This was handled with considerable grace. Thank you, I say. I mean it. I just mean it differently than I would have 10 days ago. Ha-Yun finds me in the orchard shortly after 11. She's carrying her bag in the way people carry things when they're leaving, not as luggage but as the totality of what they're taking with them, which in her case looks deliberate and light. We walk together into the row of tangerine trees where I first saw her. The same light, nearly the same hour. The trees are the same. We are not. I look at her and she looks at me and I think about the posture we share, the training we share, the specific combination of competence and armor that we were both handed by the same professional system and told was what success looked like. I think about how she used that armor for the wrong thing and then stood in a meeting room and took it off voluntarily. She steps forward and puts her arms around me briefly, with the careful specific pressure of someone holding something they know is fragile without saying so. And then she steps back, and she picks up her bag, and she walks down the path toward the road. I watch until she turns the corner. The orchard is very quiet after she's gone. I finish the final operational report at the main table in the operations building. It takes me 2 hours and it is good work, thorough and clear. And when I close the laptop, I feel the satisfaction of a thing done correctly that I have felt after every good assignment. And then I take a clean sheet of paper from the printer tray. I write 2 sentences. I fold the paper once and I carry it down to the lower orchard where I know Minho will be, because he always is at this time of day, doing the end-of-day inspection of the terrace rows before the light goes. He's standing with a tangerine in both hands, running his thumbs along the skin to check the firmness, wearing the expression of someone who is paying attention to something they love. He looks up when he hears me on the path. I hold out the paper. He takes it. He reads it. Something in his face, something very quiet and very real, moves. He folds it with both hands, with the same deliberate care he gives everything, and he places it in the breast pocket of his shirt. He puts his hand flat over it for a moment. He looks at me. I look at him. Neither of us says anything. Neither of us needs to. I go back to the guest house and I pack my bag. It takes 20 minutes because I unpack and repack once, not because I'm disorganized, but because I'm making a decision in the middle of it, and the decision reorganizes the logic of everything. The airport shuttle arrives at 2:30. I get in, I sit with my bag in my lap and watch the island go by the window as the road curves down from the resort toward the coast. The orchard disappears into the hillside. The sea appears below the cliff road, flat and silver in the afternoon light. We pass through a small town with a fruit stand at the corner, tangerines piled in bright pyramids. I think about everything that happened in the last 10 days, and I think about the version of me who stepped out of the car at the beginning of it and the version who is sitting in this shuttle now. And I try to measure the distance between them. The distance is not in the number of problems solved. I get to the airport, I check my bag, I receive my boarding pass, I walk through security with the efficiency I applied to all logistical processes, and I find the gate and I sit down. The departures board says my flight to Seoul begins boarding in 40 minutes. June is at the cafe across the concourse. He's sitting with a coffee, not looking at his phone for once, looking out at the tarmac. He looks like a man who decided to be somewhere and is being there fully rather than using it. He sees me before I look away. He comes over. He doesn't perform the approach. He sits down in the seat beside mine and looks at the gateboard and then at me. I wasn't going to say anything more, he says. I thought I'd said enough last night. You did, but I find I want to say one more thing. He looks at me directly. And the control is still there, but it's not a wall, it's a frame. It's the structure of someone who is being honest on purpose. I have spent a very long time making decisions from a position of maximum information, knowing everything before I commit to anything. And you are the first situation in years where I made a decision without enough information and the decision was still right. A pause. That matters to me. You matter to me. I wanted you to know that clearly. I look at him. He is composed and direct, and there is something genuinely unguarded in his face right now. Something that didn't exist in the man who answered the phone 2 weeks ago. I know, I say. That's real. And I'm not dismissing it, but I know what I want, I say. And I need to honor that. He looks at me. He reads my face with the precision he brings to everything, and I think he understands. Because he nods once with the gravity of someone who accepts what's true, even when it costs them. Take care of yourself, Yuna, he says. He stands. He walks back toward the caf. I look at the gateboard. The flight begins boarding in 22 minutes. I sit with that for a moment. With the hum of the terminal around me and the clean airport light and the small weight of the boarding pass in my hand, I think about 2 sentences written on a folded sheet of paper in a breast pocket. I think about the way he read them, the quality of stillness in his face, the hand placed flat over the pocket afterward. There was no question in any of it, no negotiation. Just a man receiving something true and keeping it close. I have spent a great deal of my life trying to make my value legible to people who required proof of it. It's a reasonable adaptation to an environment that asks for proof. But adaptation is not the same as preference. And I think I have been confusing the two for longer than I knew. I think about work, roughened hands, and a viewpoint at dusk, and the specific quality of a room that smells like citrus where I stopped. Calculating for the first time in 8 years. I think about June, too, with the honest accounting the moment deserves. What he offered was real. The version of him that arrived on Jeju, the one who finally told me a true thing over dinner and didn't calculate the offer he made at the airport just now, that's real. I don't dismiss it. I just know what I want more completely than I've known anything in a long time. I think about the posture I've practiced, and the person it was protecting, and whether the protection is still necessary. I stand up, I walk away from the gate, I find a seat by the large windows that face the eastern side of the airfield, where on clear days you can see the mountain. And I sit down and I hold my phone in both hands and I stay there For a full minute in the particular stillness of someone who has made a decision and is about to execute it, I dial, he picks up on the second ring. I'm still here, I say, my voice is calm, completely still. It is the first sentence I have said in I don't know how long that cost nothing, that required no management, that arrived from the part of me that has been waiting since I was 23 years old for permission to just say a true thing without armor, the real me, I say. Come find me, through the window. My plane backs away from the gate and begins its slow turn toward the runway. I watch it gather speed along the tarmac and lift, and the wheels fold up, and it curves south over the sea. Jeju doesn't take anything from you. It just gives back what you forgot to be.